All right, welcome 3D design students. We're going to make, and this is a demonstration of how to make our bobbleheads. This is a clay figure that we've created with a compression spring for a neck. Basically what we're making here are clay figures we'll be sculpting. And this can be a human figure or this can be a creature. This one's a creature. There's just a few little things to be aware of when we're making this. This is not going to be a hard project, but there are a few little details that you'll need to know. Okay, so first of all, you definitely want to create something that has a base. It needs to be able to stand up because of the spring and the heavy head. It needs definitely a solid base. So that is easy to make. We're basically going to just use any kind of shape, roll out a slab, a thick slab, I'd say a 1/2 inch at least, and then use a shape. It doesn't have to be a circle, but use a shape. Now, if you use a lid or something like that, don't use it as a cookie cutter. Use it to mark out that shape to cut out. And then use one of your tools to cut out that shape. And as you can see, I've made it a nice thick piece, and that will work well as a base. It can be a square too if you wanted to make a square or something like that. It just needs something to anchor it, as it's going to have some wobble to it, its head. All right. From there, you're going to sculpt a body, okay? Now here I've just created kind of a cylinder shape, and I can create a body. Now this does not have to be a human figure that you do. You could do an animal. You could create pretty much any kind of creature that has some feet, body, something head. I would avoid, I would have something that has a solid form, then the bobblehead, and then some sort of a head. Okay, the spring and then the head. I have had students do more of a body, and then just the legs are, it springs at the waist. And I find that it tends to be a little top heavy. You really don't want to go too huge on the bobblehead, as it'll be a little imbalanced. So what I would do is begin to create. Now if you don't have an idea of what you want to do, I would suggest that you just start with a shape and work with it from there. All right, so we have a few rules of thumb when we work with clay. One is I wouldn't go any thicker than what I have here. Okay, this is a head. If you end up with a head that is big, larger than this, it would need to be hollowed out. Now in this case, this head is hollowed out. It has its mouth open, tongue out, that kind of thing. It's very cute. So kind of be keeping that in mind. And also we'll be drilling out a space for the spring. All right, well, and also your next step is, like for example, if I created something like this, I think since I have Picasso, I think I need a Matisse. So what I'm going to do is, I got a picture here of Matisse, and I'm just pretty much going to create him in the same method with feet and legs and a body. So here's his body that I will be working with and sculpting away. So for example, if I decided I needed to split his legs a little bit to create that image of legs, I would do that. You could decide, okay, putting it together in another method, as far as instead of taking away, you could build legs, add a torso to the legs, things like that. I've had students do either direction. I kind of like the taking away method, because I know nothing, since it's already all joined together, nothing is going to come apart. Now I just put a slit down there just to kind of give the appearance of legs. It's still somewhat joined. Now I can just kind of create that crease and work with it from there. All right, not doing a very great job, but anything I mess up I can redo. That's the beauty of clay. Now I do want a couple pairs of feet here, and I can easily do that by creating the feet, shaping them to the shape I want, adding on the legs, and then begin to develop the arms. Now, whenever you create a figure or do any sort of creating and you want to add clay to clay, you definitely want to score and slip. So I am working on creating and adding these right on there, and I'm going to add arms. All right, so to add arms, I'm going to do anything that you want to add. Now, if you're going to add arms and you're going to be sticking out that way, I would caution you a little bit. Things that are limbs like this and are sticking out like this are going to be a little bit at risk of breaking. So long as they are substantial arms and attached well and things like that, it is fine. But I would suggest containing the arms inward, attached inward, and they will be more secure. Like Picasso here. He's got his arms folded. Or maybe arms, you know, downward, things like that. And when you attach clay to clay, I always recommend scoring and slipping and joining in that way. Okay? Adding a little moisture with a spray bottle. Alright, I've come along a little bit further on my Matisse, and this is how I'm going about it. I'm adding clay to clay. Whenever you add anything joined clay to clay, you want to score and slip, and this is really important because as you join clay to clay, clay is going to dry out a little bit, it's going to shrink a little bit, and it is going to potentially fall off if it's not attached well. So that roughed up surface with moisture acts like a glue. Now be sure to utilize some of these wooden tools. They're great for sculpting and just creating that look that you're looking for. Matisse here has a vest on, and so I am basically just going in here and kind of creating those layers that he has by taking away, pressing in, and sculpting and creating what I think I need it to look like. All right, there. Now once I've begun to get the body and I've attached the body onto the base and I've come along a little bit further, I'm going to sculpt the head. Now with a head, you do need to look at someone's face. You can kind of see that he has recessed eyes, and so I'm going to basically, you know, this space that you have where your eyes are kind of concaved in to that area, and then you can add back a nose, and looking at perhaps a picture of someone if you want it to look like someone in particular. I think the general rule is to get the main features. Here he has a beard, so I'm going to be adding, you know, facial hair to him and adding those kinds of things. But this is how you kind of get the basic shape of a head. Look at someone that's near you, see how they've got areas that are recessed, areas where things stick out like the nose, maybe this cheekbones, there's some areas of indent to get a basic head shape. Add ears, things like that, shape ears, things like that, and do your share of shaping and sculpting, adding, taking away. All right, once we get, and this is just as an example, once you get to the point where you want to add the spring, we won't be adding the spring until after it's fired. What we actually want to do is, this spring would melt if I stuck it and assembled it all together in the kiln and fired it. We're going to fire these separate and then add the spring. Basically the spring is added in there and we add plaster to hold it into place. So what we need is actually a hole. Now this is tricky in one respect, is you can make this hole. I want you to make sure you make this hole. One, the shoulder space here or his body needs to be substantial enough to accommodate a hole. If this is really skinny, this needs to be able to be big enough for the hole to work. I have found that this marker lid makes a big enough hole. So you can just stick that marker lid in down about a 1/2 inch and then carve out the rest. We actually want the hole, because clay shrinks a little bit, we do want this spring to fit in there loosely, because we're going to have a little bit of shrinkage, and I don't really want to carve out. It's easier to carve out now while the clay is soft than for me to grind it out with a Dremel tool, which I have done, and that's not as fun. It's easier to go a little bit bigger, because if you're a little bit bigger than expected, we can fill it with some plaster to make it smaller. Be careful not to smash it or anything like that. Alright, so there's that half. You're going to do the exact same thing to the head. I'm going to take beard off for now. But you are going to push that marker lid down in there. Oh, in that case, it took it right out. And then you've got a nice space. Just broaden it just a little bit so that that spring fits in there loosely. I would make it just even a smidge bigger. There. Once you're done and you've got this sculpted and looking like the way you'd like it, all the springs are the same size, so you don't have to worry about, we'll just keep those in one spot. Once you're all done here and you've got it looking the way you want it, we'll let these dry out. I'll fire. Alright, we reached the stage where we are painting and adding the details to our bobble heads. You have a couple options. You can use regular paint, get a nice skin color and specific colors in the details, the fine details, and that's the advantage of paint. Or you can go about using a ceramic glaze. And ceramic glaze is also nice because it has this nice shiny sheen to it when it's done. Sometimes the small fine details don't always come out as well, but you can, with ceramic glaze, draw right on your clay body and draw on it. Any pencil marks that you put on here will just burn off, and then you can get into some of the details that you're looking for. Either one works out well. Once you are done painting it, as a class, we will mix up some plaster and put the springs in the head. So the first step is to put the spring in the head, and usually the spring will fit right into that space, and if it doesn't, if we didn't estimate that correctly and you needed to grind it out just a little bit more, I do have Dremel tools, and it can be easily, takes a little bit of work, but you can grind it so that it's a little bit larger and fits in there a little bit better. There's always one or two that don't quite fit. Alright, once you fit that in there, we're gonna mix up some plaster in kind of a thin to medium consistency. It will thicken up as we move along. If you've painted it and you don't want any of that plaster to get on your nice paint job, you can use something that creates a barrier. Fill that with some of the plaster. We'll work together on this, and add your spring. Let it set up. I oftentimes also find that it settles a little bit, and I'll add just a little bit more plaster to it as time goes on, just to get it to be secure. Now, if you do get a little plaster on the face of your bobblehead, it will wipe off pretty easily. Cleans up nice. And then once these are done, you will let them sit for a little bit, and we will proceed to put the spring head into the body. That's the next step. Well, we've reached the final step. You have your bobblehead, and the spring has been set into your head, and your last step is to apply plaster into the hole there and set it. So first of all, take your head and kind of see how it fits. I found that with mine here, it was a little, the hole was a little bit big. I filled it with a little extra plaster, let that set up, and then I added add the head. Now I kind of see how it fits. I also create a neck brace. In some cases, the spring and head fit right in there perfectly, and I just pour the plaster in. In other cases, it needs a little help just to be held in place as a neck brace until it sets up. So put it into place. Figure out what you're doing there. Mix up a small quantity of the plaster and water, and this is thin, but it does thicken up. Pretty much fill it. And in some cases also, like I did with the head, I do add more. It does settle just a little bit. Place the head in place. Put the neck brace together. Tape that in place. And voila, set to go. Let that set up. Once it's set up, remove the neck brace, and it is pretty solid. I've had this one for quite a while. The plaster has stayed nicely and has worked out really well. So no worries, that plaster does set up nicely and stays. All right, that's the final step. If you have any questions, please ask at this time. Thanks.